Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into something really important. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's essay, "We Should All Be Feminists."
hmm
You mentioned wanting, really understand feminism today, but without all the academic speak or feeling like overwhelmed.
Exactly. Something clear and engaging.
Right. So our mission here is to unpack Adichie's own stories, her observations, to shed light on what feminism means now in the 21st century and, well, why it matters for everyone.
Yeah, and we'll look at her arguments, those anecdotes she shares.
And that definition she lands on at the end.
Definitely. And it's good to remember where this piece came from. It's basically an adaptation of a TEDxEuston talk she did.
Oh, right. Back in 2012.
Yeah, 2012. And TEDxEuston, that's all about African ideas and voices. Adichie had spoken before about, the danger of a single story.
I remember that one. Very powerful.
Well, she saw that the word feminist itself had become a kind of single story for a lot of people. Really loaded.
So this essay was her way of, pushing back?
Yeah.
Starting a conversation.
Pretty much. Pushing past those stereotypes. And it's very personal, drawing a lot on her life in Nigeria and how people reacted when they heard she identified as a feminist.
Okay, so let's start where she does. That first encounter with the label, her friend Okoloma.
Yeah, her childhood friend.
She says he called her a feminist during an argument. She was about 14.
And not in a good way.
Not at all. She says it was like being accused of supporting terrorists. I mean, that's intense.
It really is. It just slams home how negative the word felt, even then, to a kid.
Shows the baggage it already carried.
Absolutely. And that moment, it kind of sets the stage, doesn't it? It shows why she felt she had to write this, to sort of reclaim the word from all that negativity and misunderstanding.
Yeah, good point. And it wasn't like a one-off thing either.
Yeah.
Later, after her novel Purple Hibiscus came out, which deals with some tough stuff, right? Domestic violence.
Very tough themes, yes.
So people started calling that book feminist. And the reactions she got were all over the place.
Like if that journalist.
Right. A journalist actually told her, "Don't call yourself a feminist." His reasoning. Feminists are just like unhappy women who can't find husbands.
It sounds almost like a caricature, doesn't it? But it shows these really deeply ingrained, prejudiced ideas.
What's the underlying idea there, do you think?
Well, it seems to reveal this belief that a woman's main value is tied up in getting married, securing a man.
So if you're a feminist, you've somehow failed at that.
Yeah.
And must be unhappy.
That seems to be the warped logic. Yeah. It really highlights the kind of pressure women are under.
And it didn't stop there. The misconceptions just kept coming.
There was the academic, right? The Nigerian academic.
Yeah, who told her feminism wasn't African. That it was some, Western import.
Which Adichie found pretty amusing.
Well, yeah. She points out her early reading was full of those, really unfeminist romance novels. She wasn't exactly reading Betty Friedan from day one.
Right. She even says some of the classic feminist texts were, kind of dense for her initially.
Then another friend told her feminism just meant hating men.
Ah, the classic man-hater stereotype.
Which led to her coming up with those funny self-descriptions.
Oh, yeah, like the happy African feminist who does not hate men.
And who likes to wear lip gloss and high heels for herself and not for men. It's witty, but it seriously highlights how twisted the image can get.
That humor is so effective, though. She uses it to just dismantle these heavy, kind of ridiculous stereotypes.
Like the idea that you can't be feminist in, high heels.
Exactly. She challenges that rigid image.
Okay, so after dealing with the label itself, she talks about an early experience of inequality, something that really stuck with her.
The class monitor incident.
Yes, primary school. She got the highest score on the test. Expected to be made class monitor, which was apparently a big deal.
Sought after role, yeah.
But the teacher just announced, nope, the monitor has to be a boy.
Even though the boy who got it had the second highest score.
And didn't even want the job. He got it purely because he was a boy.
That seems like such a small thing, maybe, but it's huge in terms of what it teaches. Well, it shows how inequality gets baked in, normalized. Through these little actions, these assumptions repeated over time.
So the message, even to kids, is that certain roles just go to boys, regardless of who's actually best suited or interested.
Pretty much. It's like this early programming, and it probably really sparked her awareness of these biases.
She makes a great point about that normalization, too. She says, if we do something over and over again, it becomes normal.
If we see the same thing over and over again, it becomes normal.
And she connects that to, seeing only men as CEOs. It starts to feel natural, even though it's just bias.
Right. It's that systemic thing. It's not always deliberate discrimination, but these patterns, these subtle biases, they shape everything. They make the unequal way things are seem, well, normal, like the default setting.
Which maybe explains her conversations with her friend Louis.
Ah, yes, Louis, the progressive friend.
She describes him as smart, progressive,
Hmm.
but he just couldn't really see how things were still unequal for women now, today.
He thought maybe in the past, but things are level now, sort of.
Yeah. And she was just like amazed he couldn't see what felt so obvious from her own life.
It's a perfect example of how privilege can create blind spots, isn't it?
How do you mean?
Well, Louis,
Right.
as a man, probably hasn't faced the same kind of everyday sexism, those little cuts that Adichie has. So even if he means well, his perspective is missing that direct experience and makes it hard to fully get it.
To really drive that home, she gives these really concrete, everyday examples from Lagos.
The parking attendant one is
Oh,
classic.
yeah, she gives the attendant a tip. She pays him.
But who does he thank?
Her male friend who's with her just assumes the money must have come from the man.
It's such a small moment, but wow, it says so much about assuming male financial control, doesn't it?
Totally erases her agency in that second.
And these aren't necessarily malicious acts, right? The endon probably didn't even think about it. But it's the unconscious bias reinforcing that men are in charge of the money. Happens all the time.
Then there's the hotel thing.
Right. A Nigerian woman walks into a hotel lobby alone,
And the assumption often is that she's a sex worker.
whereas a man walks in alone, no suspicion at all.
Just a total double standard.
Yes.
It's about judging women's presence in public space, isn't it?
Exactly. Scrutinizing them, sexualizing them. In a way, men just aren't. Men get the benefit of the doubt.
And it gets more direct, too. She mentions being literally denied entry to clubs or bars in Lagos,
Reputable places, she says.
unless she had a man with her,
Mm-hmm.
needing a male escort just to go out. In this day and age, it's kind of shocking.
It speaks to controlling women's freedom, doesn't it? Reinforces this old idea that women need male supervision or they're somehow incomplete or maybe dangerous.
Yeah, it's a real barrier. And even just eating out,
The waiter's ignoring her.
yeah, consistently greeting the man she's with, talking to him, even if she's the one hosting or paying.
And she says, look, intellectually, they probably don't mean harm.
But emotionally, it's different. She says it makes her feel invisible, upset.
And that's the key, isn't it? These aren't just abstract ideas. They have a real emotional impact. These little things piling up, constantly reminding you you're seen as secondary.
So she wrote an article about these experiences, about being young and female in Lagos.
And someone told her it was too angry.
Right. An acquaintance dismissed it. But Adichie doesn't back down from the anger. She calls gender inequality a grave injustice.
And says we should all be angry.
Yeah. But she also knows how women expressing anger is often seen very differently than when men do.
Oh, definitely. Women get labeled threatening or hysterical.
While a man's anger might be seen as passion or strength.
Right. It's about policing women's emotions. Anger is a powerful voice for change, historically. So suppressing women's anger helps keep things as they are.
She then gives examples from the professional world, those double standards.
Like the American manager, the woman.
Yes, called aggressive for doing the exact same things her male predecessor was praised for.
Happens all the time.
And her friend in advertising.
The one who cried in the bathroom.
Yeah, rather than confront her boss because she was afraid of being labeled aggressive, it's like walking this impossible tightrope.
It really is. You get penalized for being too assertive, but also for being too passive. You have to be likable, which often means not rocking the boat, even when things are unfair. It really holds women back.
And she links this directly to how we're socialized, doesn't she?
Absolutely. Her point about how much time we spend teaching girls to worry about what boys think.
Compared to how little time we spend teaching boys to consider girls' perspectives.
It's a huge imbalance.
Mhm.
And girls are told, don't be angry, don't be too loud, don't be tough.
While boys often get a pass, or even praise, for the same things, all the advice columns for women on how to catch and keep a man.
And virtually none for men on how to treat women well. It constantly centers the male view, reinforcing that a woman's job is basically to please men.
Which limits girls, stops them from being fully human, really.
Definitely. And she shares that really chilling story from her writing workshop.
Oh, the young woman who was warned.
Warned that listening to Adichie's feminist talk would ruin her marriage.
That just shows the real-world consequences, doesn't it? The actual threats women face if they step outside traditional roles.
It's not just theory. There are real social, sometimes economic pressures to conform. The fear of losing marriage or social standing is a powerful way to keep women in line.
But Adichie is really clear that this whole system, these rigid gender roles, they don't just hurt women.
No, she argues they damage boys, too, profoundly.
How so?
By forcing them into this tiny, hard, small cage of masculinity, teaching them they always have to be tough, stoic, can't show vulnerability.
It stifles their humanity, she says.
Exactly. It limits their emotional range, forces them to suppress so much of themselves.
That example she gives about dating is so spot on.
The pressure on boys to always pay.
Yeah, even if they're broke. Just to prove they're man enough, it links masculinity directly to money.
And she asks, what if we didn't do that? What if it was just about who has more money at the time, regardless of gender?
Seems simple, but it would change a lot. Less pressure on guys, more equality from the start.
And she says the worst part of forcing boys to be hard all the time
Is that it creates fragile egos.
very fragile egos. And because of that, we then raise girls to constantly walk on eggshells around those egos.
So the pressure on boys leads directly to pressure on girls to cater to them. It's a cycle.
Precisely, it's all connected. Maintaining that male dominance, even if it's built on insecurity, requires women to be accommodating and non-threatening.
Which brings her to how women are taught to shrink themselves.
Yes. Don't be too successful. Don't achieve too much.
Or you might intimidate men. She even talks about women pretending not to be the main breadwinner.
And she just calls out the whole idea of emasculation, questions it directly.
I love her response to that acquaintance in Nigeria who asked if she worried about intimidating men.
What did she say again?
Basically, why would she want to be with a man who was intimidated by her?
Perfect. Just rejects the whole premise that her success should be seen as a threat. It's about being secure enough to celebrate each other.
She also really goes after the way society obsesses over marriage for women.
It's positioned as the ultimate achievement for girls, isn't it?
Yeah, much more than for boys.
Yeah.
And those examples she gives, women selling their houses or wearing fake wedding rings.
Just to get basic respect, it's heartbreaking. It shows how much a woman's worth is still tied to whether she's married.
While an unmarried man is just, what, a bachelor enjoying life?
Right. The difference in how society views unmarried men and women over a certain age is still so stark. Women get pity, suspicion sometimes. Men just get seen as independent.
And she argues these expectations get inside our heads, they're internalized.
So it's not always easy for women to just say no or push back.
Even the language we use around marriage.
Yeah.
Often about ownership, not partnership.
And how respect means different things when applied to men versus women.
That example of doing it for peace in the marriage.
Yeah, for men it might mean like agreeing on a vacation spot, minor stuff.
But for women, often means giving up careers, big dreams, huge sacrifices.
It shows that unequal burden of compromise women often carry.
Then she talks about girls being raised as competitors.
Competitors for male attention, specifically, instead of allies.
And the double standards around sex. The way girls' bodies are policed. The shame they're taught.
It's all about control, isn't it? Controlling female sexuality, making women feel responsible for men's behavior.
That story about the gang rape in Nigeria and the reaction.
Horrifying. People asking what she was doing there with boys.
Blaming the victim. It's just staggering. Shows how deep that bias runs. She's guilty until proven innocent, almost, while the men aren't held accountable.
Like a terrible illustration of how women are often held responsible for men's lack of self-control.
So her core argument becomes about gender itself, how it prescribes how we should be.
Instead of recognizing who we actually are. And that limits everyone, men and women.
That cooking example is great. Cooking female role, supposedly.
Yeah. Yet most famous chefs are men. It completely blows up the idea of innate gender skills.
So we should focus on ability, right?
Yeah.
And interest, not gender.
Exactly. Especially when raising kids. Like that story about her parents telling her sister to cook for her brother.
Even though the sister hated cooking. And cooking is a useful skill for everyone.
Right. It just reinforces those outdated roles from day one. Teach both kids to cook.
And she mentions housework in marriages, too. Still unequal, even when both partners work the same jobs.
And the way women often overthank men for doing basic childcare, like changing a diaper, is heroic.
As if it's not their job, too. It highlights that assumption that childcare is still fundamentally the woman's domain.
Reinforces the imbalance.
Adichie then gets quite personal. sharing her own struggles with these ideas.
Like when she was a young instructor, feeling she had to dress differently.
Yeah, in a manly suit, she says, to be taken seriously,
Hmm.
because she felt her femininity would undermine her authority.
While her male colleagues probably never gave their clothes a second thought in the same way.
Exactly. Men are still the default standard in so many professional settings. She regrets not just being herself.
It's powerful that she shares that vulnerability. Shows how pervasive these pressures are, even for someone like her.
But she follows it up with a really strong statement that she's chosen now not to apologize for her femininity.
And wants respect as a woman in her full femaleness.
Yeah. Saying her choices, her style, they're not for the male gaze, they're for her.
It's a real declaration of independence from those external pressures, embracing herself fully.
Okay, towards the end, she tackles a common question.
Right.
Why feminist? Why not just human rights?
Right. People often suggest that, maybe thinking it sounds less confrontational, more inclusive.
But Adichie argues that would be dishonest. Why?
Because it ignores the specific way women have been and are oppressed because of their gender. Human rights are crucial, obviously, but feminism names the specific problem.
So avoiding the word feminist actually obscures the reality of gender-based discrimination.
That's her point. You need to name the problem to fix it. And the problem, historically and currently, has disproportionately affected women based on their sex.
She also talks about why some men might feel threatened by feminism.
Linking it back to that fragile masculinity, the pressure to always be in charge.
Yeah, insecurity born from how boys are raised. And she also addresses men who just say, oh, I don't really think about gender, or it's not really a problem anymore.
That passive stance, believing that ignoring it makes it go away.
And she urges men to speak up, even against the small stuff, the casual sexism.
Which is so important. Male allyship makes a huge difference in challenging those everyday biases.
She also quickly bats away some other common arguments, doesn't she? Like using evolution to justify inequality.
Yeah, or the what about poor men argument. She points out rightly that poor men still have male privilege compared to poor women.
And the idea of bottom power,
Yeah.
women manipulating from behind the scenes.
She dismisses that as not being real power. It's not equal or sustainable.
So finally, she takes on the big one. It's just our culture. The idea that female subordination is just how things are culturally.
And she completely rejects that. Culture isn't set in stone, she says.
People make culture so people can change it.
Exactly. She uses that incredible example from Igbo culture, the killing of twins.
Which used to be the norm, deeply ingrained.
And is now unthinkable. It proves that even fundamental cultural beliefs can change.
She connects it personally to being excluded from family meetings just because she's female.
Even though she cared more about the traditions than many of the men, it shows how culture, as it stands, can disadvantage women even when they're invested in it.
So her conclusion on culture is really powerful.
Yeah. If our culture doesn't currently include the full humanity of women,
Then we have to make it our culture. Actively change it.
it's a call to action, a rejection of passively accepting harmful traditions.
And then she brings it all back together. Back to Oklahoma, back to the dictionary.
Feminist, a person who believes in the social, political, and economic equality of the sexes. Pretty straightforward.
And she mentions her great-grandmother. A feminist in spirit and action without ever using the word.
Which shows it's about the belief and the action, not just the label.
Then she offers her own definition.
Yeah.
Which is just so simple and clear.
What is it again?
Yeah.
A man or a woman who says,
Yes, there's a problem with gender as it is today, and we must fix it. We must do better.
I love that. It's about acknowledging the problem and committing to improvement. That's it.
And she ends by saying, we all men and women, we must all do better.
It's such an accessible, action-focused definition. Takes away the baggage and just focuses on, see the problem, let's work on it. Makes it inclusive.
So listening back to all this deep dive,
Yeah.
it really clarifies things, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Feminism, according to Adichie here, is not about hating men. It's not about rejecting femininity.
Not at all. It's fundamentally about seeing the inequalities that exist because of gender.
And then actively working to fix them. To build a fair world where everyone gets the same chances, the same freedom to be themselves.
Without being boxed in by narrow ideas about what men or women should be.
And those everyday examples she uses, they're just so effective at showing how these inequalities are still playing out, often in ways we don't even notice.
That's what makes her approach so relatable, I think. She grounds this big idea, feminism, in these really small, tangible moments.
The parking guy, the hotel guard, the waiter.
Yeah, it's in those little interactions that you really feel the bias. You see how pervasive it is.
Exactly. It's those little things, like she says, that add up and really shape how women experience the world day to day.
It's not just about big political fights that they matter, but also about noticing and challenging these constant low-level assumptions and slights.
And by sharing her own stories, she makes it less abstract, more personal. It kind of invites you to think about your own experiences, right?
Absolutely. It's not about pointing fingers, more about encouraging that self-reflection, helping us all see the patterns in our own lives and societies.
So maybe here's something for listeners to really think about after this.
Hmm.
Consider your own day, the small interactions you have or witness.
Hmm.
Have you ever seen a situation, or maybe even been part of one without realizing, where gender just shaped expectations or made assumptions where it didn't need to?
That's a good question to ask ourselves.
What could happen if we all started to actively, consciously question those norms we take for granted? Adichie's essay isn't just describing the problem. It feels like a call to imagine something different.
And not just imagine it, but to actually start building it, to contribute to a reality that's genuinely more equitable for everybody.
Yeah, it's about moving from just being aware to actively doing something, even in small ways.
Questioning those norms, challenging them gently maybe, that's where the real change starts perhaps, in those everyday moments.